There's a turn I didn't see coming. So after completion, I myself only played with this machine in Data East's head office and on the second floor of a game center that was on the current GIGO Ikeburo 2 in a machine set up for location testing. I went there to play in the few days it was there, and it was only these 2 times I played the game. It might have been a small cabinet aimed for children, giving out candy when you won and at the location testing, I remember it giving out Data East stickers. After that, the cabinet may be due to it giving candy as prizes. It didn't fit the regulations and had to be shelved. Feel like I heard that a few years later, some machines were sold wholesale to places like provincial inns. Fair enough. What? Hold on, what the fuck just happened? Hold on. Okay, so it does seem to... Okay, yeah, it seems to have crashed. Okay. That is annoying. Hold on. Let me try this. Okay, so apparently my stream There we go, okay. Hopefully, this fixes the problem. Okay, let's see if this works. That's... Okay, there we go. Do I live? Am I alive? There we go. Okay. Hold on. We live. Okay, I don't know why Twitch decided to fucking just stop on me. I wasn't done like streaming. Anyway. So, where was I? Oh yeah, so we just got...
The machine didn't met regulations because of giving out candy as prizes. So Data East had to shelve the machines they had, and only many years later, they sold it wholesale to provincial inns. Because it didn't have a proper release, he was happy that people ended up being able to see his work. Data East would soon later leave the arcade market due to financial issues and would eventually file for bankruptcy a few years later. So, how did we end up here? Well, circumstances make this an extremely rare game, but ultimately it did end up coming out, which means it existed. There were
Well, presumably, right? Presumably.
very little people here and there claiming to have played it, and one rather detailed Yahoo Answers post in 2012, reminiscing it at a time you couldn't even find a picture of it online. The cabinets are probably long gone, but the circuit board for the game ended up popping on Yahoo Auctions in October of 2019, which was
45,500 yen. Hold on, let me see if I can find out what that is. Oh, well, he might say it himself.
sold for 45,500 yen, about $420, and it became
Oh yeah, okay, so he did the conversion for us.
emulatable in September 30, 2020 in MAME 0.225, a year after that auction. The
Hold on, okay. We got text to read. Okay. Whether it's the autumn harvest moon or the ornamental plum blossoms are blowing in the spring breeze, it's time for something special. Mame 0.225 is out today. We've got some big updates that benefit everyone. First of all, Mame's sound output system has been overhauled with better sample rate conversion and mixing. This makes pretty much everything sound sweeter, but on top of that, the Votrax SC-01 speech synthesizer has been tuned up. Does anyone here speak Cubertese? Okay, so it's funny that I mentioned Qbert earlier, and now Cubertese has come to roost, right? SC-1001 okay, yeah. Speech has been added to the Apple II Mockingbird card too. While we're talking about Apple II cards, Rhett Altman has ported the CS8900A Crystal LAN Ethernet controller from Vice, allowing Mame to emulate a A2 Retro Systems Ethernet card. New working machines. Okay, well, I'm not going to read that part because it's basically, it reads like a citation.
The people responsible for this are a group called the Dumping Union.
Thanks to recent donations from Annie Scott Moore, anonymous donor from Italy, Russell Howard, Evan Kors, Henrique Arias Pontes, Sean Sutton, Evan Corzon, Mr. Goodwraith, Christopher Brownlee, Gamer Fan, and Very Big Kintama, we got a rare Data East MLC cart called Look Over There. Oh, so this is basically, again, this is like a lost media archival thing.
A group of people who aims to preserve old arcade game data.
Yeah, so these are archivists.
But we ended up here being able to see this extremely cute girl from this extremely rare game is a result of earnest game preservation by a good number of people.
Yes, you know.
And then there's the people who managed to make the game playable in the first place.
So, let's see. Mame Jankin Achimuite Hoi, copyright 1995, Data East. This was posted on September 22nd, 2020. This is from David Mamehaze Haywood's channel. This highly polished rock, paper, scissors redemption type game running on Data East Deco MLC platform. It was dumped and emulated thanks to Phil Bennett, Showtime, Surgeville, Sean Sutton, J-Red, Mike Krug, Smit Dog, and the Dumping Union. I spent a while improving the Deco MLC emulation some years back, so it's good to see this holds up well. This will be supported in the Mame 0.225 release. Brian McPhail, okay. Crimson Rain 14, archivists, my beloved, yes. Support your local archivist, right? So McPhail is or File, is that File? Yeah. Okay, so it's Brian McPhail. And Pier Paolo Prazzoli fixed some issues in the Deco driver. Deco MLC video hardware near perfect for the most part. However, no game works properly because of an unemulated math coprocessor attached to the DE156 chip. Brian McPhail made improvements to the Deco MLC games, added sprite buffering, fixed the tile banking, fixed clear color, added sprite clipping, and ARM interruption bug fix. Let's see. The only thing left for this driver is really raster support for the pitch in Stadium Hero.
And then we have the people who posted gameplay.
Chicken Tender says, glad you're back and sorry phone died same time I sent last bitch. Fair enough, right?
Which was spread around by the
I'm glad you came back, man.
winds of the algorithm, which ended up with you watching this video. That's the flow of life.
Again, as you said, it's like this really cute girl. And like my whole thing is like, yeah, she's really cute. It's like, yeah, just look at these faces.
Which ended up with you watching this video. That's the flow.
Like right there, it's like, again, just really, you can't really. It's just cute. It's just very cute.
The flow of
Again, even like the more annoyed faces are just like adorable.
life. I guess I don't have a good way to finish this.
Again, that's just really cute.
Before I close things up, I would like to give a few comments on some details of the game. When you start your match with Tomomi, she spins and does a pose. It is not confirmed, but apparently this pose is apparently called a Kyain pose, which is a signature pose of the comedy duo Kyain, formed in 1991, who are still active to this day.
Today I learned another thing.
I've seen people saying this pose was popular at the time, So she wasn't just randomly acting cute for the sake of it.
Well, I mean, well, the two are not mutually exclusive. So let me go back here. It wasn't a Dutch Shuno pose. It is a Cayenne pose. Cayenne pose is nostalgic, and then Cayenne pose that was popular at the time. Yeah.
She's just an energetic girl making a reference to some comedians she like.
It's not exactly, right? It's not exactly, but it is extremely close. There's one big detail that I can definitely see, like, is not the case. So if you look at the picture of the... Hai Shen Kyojin comedy duo lo. Yeah, fair enough, Kura. There is a slight detail here that has definitely changed from the photo on the left-hand side versus the image on the right-hand side. And if you look at the backs of the two men, right, the back of the one on the left-hand side is just essentially straight, right, except for obviously the turn of the head. And in the one on the right, there is a small bit of a curve, but it's more of like the shoulders going, like, it's the shoulders going back, right? There is definitely a much more pronounced curve in Tomomi's back in this entire thing, right? So, just saying, right? There's the head turn isn't as severe, and the back is definitely curved more, which... let's just be perfectly honest here. Kind of, protrudes the buttocks out a little bit further, right? But it is a cute pose.
Also, very important, when the next opponent appears shoving her out of the way, you get a peek of her camisole.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Well...
Very important. How wonderful.
I love this man. I've never seen a video of this man before in my life, but I love him to death. Holy shit. I gotta rewind that.
Also, very important, when the next opponent appears shoving her out of the way, you get a peek of her camisole. Very important. How...
Okay, you know what? Give me one moment. Okay, hold on. Am I subscribed to this guy already? Okay, I am subscribed to him already. Damn it. The one time I don't want to be subscribed to someone, so I can subscribe for that exact joke.
Wonderful. Anyways, on every stage, the background elements play Achimuitehoi along your opponent. But the element that interests me the most is on the Maiko stage, the fire on the mountain, that is called Gozan no Okuribi, the ceremonial bonfires of the 5 mountains. It happens at the culmination of the Obon festival, where giant bonfires are lit on mountains surrounding Kyoto, and this one is on the shape of the kanji big.
Interesting, because the one that they showed originally in that first video was a Tori gate, it looked like.
However, in the game, there's a little extra
for dog. Interesting.
line on the upper right corner, making it the kanji for dog. This is a reference to a local story where
I didn't notice that. The fucking the fire in the background moves with the game.
around the 60s or 70s, someone pulled this off as a prank. However, in my research to find if it was true or not, I only found people claiming they could not find proof it actually happened. So this is urban legend. Well, I don't think there's much more to say about Junken game Achimuitehoi. If you enjoy my videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. But if you want to support something else, the Dumping Union accepts donations for the sake of game preservation. That might be more interesting to you. I would like to thank all of my patrons now.
I do like these little histories in like video game obscurities, right? I mean, this is a very cute game. I would definitely play this game if I had the ability, if I had first of all, the hardware and like the actual game software. But
Thank you, Dark Rose. Thank you, Vederepi. Thank you, Furwon.
okay, so this is basically just the thank you to the Patreon supporters. So yeah, this is a delightful little. I actually really enjoyed this. This is again kind of like the kind of autistic research that I actually do quite enjoy. Source is Pastebin. Fair enough, right? So again, she got very popular lately. All I gotta say is this guy definitely liked he definitely liked the female characters, right? Very, you know, I found it charming, right? Kura Onigurashi says Oban Festival is essentially Japan's more wholesome version of the Day of the Dead, if I'm not mistaken. I've never made that association. I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to think about that. You've given me something to think about. I'm definitely gonna have to think about that. But the Day of the Dead is actually itself pretty wholesome. It's just the Day of the Dead itself is pretty wholesome. It's actually a Catholic holiday, but it's essentially All Souls Day, right? Just Mexicanized. Oh wait. Okay, I forgot. I need to end the recording for this video. Damn. So, if you're again, if you're watching the recording of this video, thank you. I will see you in the next video. I hope you have a lovely day. I'm still trying to figure out how to end these videos, but that'll be it for right now. And if you're watching, if you're on the stream, keep here if you want to, because I have a couple more things to get through. All right, so now that we have that, I think we have time for at least one more. Okay. So where do we want to? This one's definitely going to probably be a decently long hour video. Let's see. I don't know if anyone here has ever watched Liberty Pen. I remember this from back in the day, right? But I don't know how much I can actually extrapolate on Ayn Rand talking about like the evil of altruism. Because it's a good point that she makes, but it's not particularly one that I think I can add that much to. How long is this? This is like 8 minutes, 7 minutes. I might be able to do both of these actually. Okay. We'll start with the Ayn Rand one, right? It gets back to my philosophy stuff. All right. So today we are going to be reacting to Ayn Rand, Why Altruism is Evil by Liberty Pen, right? I actually quite like Liberty Pen. Maybe I should find some Thomas Sowell and Walter E. Williams and like Hans Hermann Hoppe videos to react to as well, right? But all right, so let's get on. Ayn Rand is usually, I like her, even she's very clear in like what she talks about, and she has a very good track record of actually showing her work. And right off the bat, I actually agree with the statement that altruism is actually evil, especially when you properly understand altruism instead of like the overly broad definition that is used in the common conversation. If you actually understand what altruism is, philosophically speaking, I think it's very hard to justify altruism. So there's a lot of that thing where it's like the spell casting, where it's like you get someone to have a false impression of reality around them, and then to operate in that hyper reality or that the beyond reality state. So this is brought to us apparently by the Ayn Rand Institute. WKCR Radio 1984 interview with Ayn Rand, The Psychology of Altruism. So we're not talking metaphysics here, we're talking psychology apparently.
Now from the staff of WKCR, here is your moderator, Arthur Gandolfi.
To begin with, Ms. Rand, would you define what altruism is?
Altruism is an ethical system which claims that man has no right to exist for his own sake, that the sole justification of his existence is the service he renders to others, and that self-sacrifice is his basic virtue, value, and duty.
So there's already a problem in, again, like just like describing altruism. And it's not a problem with what Rand has described. Hold on, did I miss your reaction to Fleek's vid? Fleek? What are you talking about? To Fleek's video. Oh shit, yeah, I wrote that down. Hold on. Where did I put that? It's here somewhere. Son of a bitch, where did I put that? I'll have to find it. Let's see. Kura says altruism is irrational and evil. I prefer pessimistic optimism. Right, but that whole idea, right? That man, his life is not self-justifying, right? And that his value is determined by the self-sacrifice and service he does for others, right? Well, what about the people who can't, right? What about the people who actually, for physical or mental reasons, cannot perform that self-sacrifice, right? For example, like, what about people who have a mental handicap, right? So they literally can't perform these particular endeavors. Or again, let's say someone who's a paraplegic, right? Can no longer actually do work in service of other people. What is the value of their life, right? If the justification of man in his life is, again, service to the other, what happens to a man in the value of his life when he is no longer capable of performing service, right? This is one of the dangers that comes with the altruistic worldview. And in fact, actually, funny enough, Helen Keller, fucking communist, by the way, actually talked about this, about how disabled people need to be able to actually perform work. Otherwise, they have no right, or otherwise they're a parasite and should be effectively, removed from the population permanently. It's a kind of bleak, the kind of eugenics that Helen Keller, proposed. Yeah, so, that's where that whole idea comes from. The whole eugenic idea is an altruistic idea, right?
Altruism regards man, in effect, as a sacrificial animal. The word is coined by Auguste Comte in the 19th century to mean specifically the placing of the interests of others above your own.
I would also like to say that in English, it's also not possible to really articulate this without contradicting yourself. I don't know about in other languages, right? But let's take, for example, actually, funny enough. So, Brewer the Boomer actually asked me a question. He wanted a quote from me, right? And the quote I gave him, I'm not going to tell what the purpose of this was. I'm just going to tell you what I gave him. It was a quote from Ayn Rand. And it was, to say I love you, one must first know how to say the I. Right? Like, love itself, even love itself has a rational self-interest basis to it. Right? And in fact, again, we can even show this in like the greatest commandment from the Bible, right? What's the greatest commandment from the Bible, right? It is the whole love God and love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Well, love thy neighbor as thyself, I think, is actually, it's either Deuteronomy or Leviticus. I don't remember which book it was, but it's an Old Testament commandment. But think about that line, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, if you that teaching comes with a nested secondary command. So it's actually two commands nested into one, right? So the first command is obviously love thy neighbor, right? But that command only makes sense reference to the nested second command, which is love thyself, right? Because if you do not love thyself and you are to regard your neighbor as yourself, well, then what good is this commandment? Right? Like, what good is the fucking command? What good is the commandment of love thy neighbor as thyself if you don't care for yourself in the first place, right? It's vacuous gas. So it's like the only way that commandment actually makes sense is if you import the idea that you have to be selfish in the first place, right? And as Kura points out, it's like, put your own gas mask on first is more my mentality. And he's entirely right? It's like, if the plane is going down, before you can help someone else put on like the fucking oxygen mask, you first have to put on your own oxygen mask, because what good are you if you fucking pass out before you can help anyone else? Right? Like an EMT, because I was trained as an EMT back in the day. I did not renew my license, but I was trained as an EMT back in the day. And one of the things we were told is like, if someone's shooting, or if like there's a fire, you don't go in there. The first rule of being emergency rescue is do not become a victim yourself, right? What good are you if you end up having to be another body that has to be dragged away to the hospital for repair yourself, right? Crimson Rain 14 says there's also another angle. Don't just take your neighbor's pants off and start loving them the way you do your... Okay, yeah. Okay. I walked into that one. Okay. Note to self: read the whole thing in my head before I read it out loud. Right? You got me. Oh, you got me. I did not see that coming.
I wonder if you would discuss why to be altruistic and to be benevolent is not the same.
This is a package deal spread and fostered by the altruist.
Yes, this is another thing she's right about. The altruist actually does benefit by, again, obliterating the distinction between benevolence and altruism itself, right? So the association is absolutely a psyop.
It is to their own interest to suggest to men that altruism merely means kindness or benevolence or respect for the rights of others, which it does not.
This is also why I don't like Stoicism, because Stoicism comes with a lot of nested assumptions that are not just be a man and like tough it out, right? I mean, the Stoics would have told you be a man and tough it out. The Stoics also had a deep metaphysic that actually was the basis for their ethics, right? And part of that metaphysics is a pantheism. The Stoics believed that the universe itself was God, was Zeus, and that tension itself was the life breath of Zeus, of God. But yeah, no one who preaches Stoicism now, which is, you know, the modern Stoicism is a vacuous, empty conception because it has no metaphysical basis. But, you know, and people often try to graft it on to things it doesn't work with. Because, again, the reason Stoicism in the Greek sense was the way it was because, again, they were pantheists. They were not, you know, compatible with a Christian or an atheist worldview. But anyway, I digress. That's a bit of me complaining about people doing this, like, what they did to altruism, they did to Stoicism too, and that's why I don't like either of them. Kura's like, neither did the neighbor. Fair enough.
In fact, most people, I would venture to say an overwhelming majority, do believe that that is all that altruism means. So that, in effect, if you give a dime to a beggar, you are an altruist. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, this is one of those times where it's like, again, they worshipped pans. But yeah, this is one of those cases where it's like the common use of the term actually makes the term so broad as to actually functionally make it useless. It's again an obscuration tactic.
Because altruism does not claim that you should help others when and if you can. It specifically claims that you should subordinate your own interests to the interests of others, and therefore others should take first place in your life as a moral duty.
This is also why altruism is inherently collectivistic, right? Because the individual subordinates himself to the good of all others to the expense of himself, right? As a living human sacrifice. And this is ontologically untenable. Because you can point out, it's like, oh yeah, you need other people to, to have a good life, right? To have that eudaimonia, as Aristotle would say, the goodness of spirits. But on the flip side, if we take an ontological view of this, right, a study of being in and of itself, the individual can, in fact, exist without society. In fact, we have multiple instances of this, right? We have several examples of a last of their, people, or of someone isolated for X, Y, or Z reason who managed to survive, even sometimes for extremely long periods of time, without anyone else to back them up, right? We have, for example, we know of last members of tribes in, for example, the Amazon rainforest that resist being contacted, and they've lived for decades on their own with no contact with anyone else. We know, for example, of soldiers from World War II who refused to stop fighting, even though they were the only one in there, keeping on the fight in, like, the Philippines or, like, in some other forest in South, in the Indo-Pacific area. Yeah, Indo-Pacific islands. So you can absolutely have individuals without the collective. You cannot have the collective without individuals. So ontologically speaking, the individual is very obviously primary, and the collective is an emergent secondary thing. And anyone trying to suggest otherwise is just completely disconnected from reality. So, yeah, there's a reason. So altruism is always intrinsically collectivistic, whereas as opposed to individualistic. This is why altruism is also coercive to any individualistic, culture.
In that case, kindness is impossible. If it is your duty to give away your last penny to anyone who might need it, you are giving him his due.
And kindness is probably not the best word here, but charity also becomes impossible, right? Because the whole point of charity is that it's an act of grace, of unmerited grace, right? So when you give to charity, it's not because you have to give to charity. Otherwise, again, it's not charity. It's a due. It's an obligation. When you're truly being charitable, you are giving help to someone who does not merit it. That is the definition of charity, right? Because if it was not that, it would, by definition, not be charity. It would be an obligation. It would actually be an entitlement for the person. So charity is actually impossible under altruism too, because again, since your labor and your life are actually, they don't belong to you, they belong to the other, someone who is in some sense doing who's doing worse than you. So the productive live for the sake of the unproductive. Then there's no possibility for charity. Like, definitionally speaking, it just would not exist, because again, all assistance to those less fortunate is that which is due. It's not that which is unmerited. And so charity just does not exist by definition. People don't really think about this kind of stuff, but it's the logical consequence of altruism. And the logical extension of altruism, to be perfectly honest, is things like eugenics, right? What do we do for the best of the collective, right? Do we let bad genes prosper? No. Well, the altruistic response is, again, snuff out those genes. Not necessarily through murder, but prevent those genes from propagating, right? And that would mean that, for example, you get people who don't get the right to have families of their own. You also get things like, again, do you deserve the fruit of your labor? Well, the productive fruit, under altruism, the fruit of the labor of the productive, no, they don't deserve it. Because that material, that work, goes to the unproductive. Again, because you as an individual, your life is defined by service. The productive live to sacrifice themselves to the unproductive, whether it be unproductive because they won't produce or because they can't produce, right? Because again, there's that distinction. So altruism, communism is the logical child of altruism. And remember how many people died under communism.
In fact, altruists would say it is his right to demand your penny.
Yep.
Therefore, it's not an action of kindness or generosity or charity on your part. It is a moral duty. Altruism, in fact, makes benevolence among men impossible. Because if you have to regard all other men as mortgage holders on your life, if their claims have to supersede any interest of your own, then you can feel nothing but fear and hatred toward other men, since they are a threat to your own existence. And if you do not satisfy their claims, you have to take moral blame for it. That makes any kind of authentic benevolence among men impossible. It entails other contradictions. There is no reason why you should consider the benefit of others as a value if you do not consider your own benefit a value.
I don't really have a disagreement there, right? I think she's just totally spot on about this, right? I already said the whole thing about, again, charity. It's not just charity. Most virtues actually end up falling apart in being completely impossible under the quote unquote virtue of altruism, when you actually actually examine it and what its logical implications are. Hello, Captain Rudy. We're taking altruists to task right now. Oh, is that an Ember Paradox? Yep, that is an Ember Paradox emote. But where was I? Oh yeah. But again, the whole premise of altruism is again focused on that implicit contradiction. here's the thing. Altruism commits the same cardinal sin that like most ethical systems do. Not all. There's two, maybe three ethical systems that actually avoid this cardinal sin, but they're also the ones that people really don't want to entertain. And it's kind of telling, right? And so the cardinal sin most ethical systems make is that they turn human beings into a sort of sacrifice to false gods, right? Now that may sound like a wild claim, but you have to remember that like polytheism. Let's just take a step back. Like polytheism and animism. What exactly are the gods, right? Well, they're abstractions. That's all they are. Like they're either ghosts, like in the case of like Zeus or Poseidon, right? These are ghosts that are worshipped. Or in the case of like Libertas in the Roman Republic, right? Before the advent of Christianity, was the goddess or personification, literally the abstraction of liberty. There's like what is Oranos or like Gaia, personification or ghost of the sky or of the earth, right? So those are ghosts or the abstractions thereof, right? So just raw abstractions like opportunity, liberty, of the collective, right? The state itself, the polis was a god in Greek polytheism, right? You had the god of the polis, the state, both the abstraction of the city and the ghost associated with the city. So let's consider that. Are we serving abstractions or are we in the concrete reality when we talk about an ethical system? Let's take deontology, for example. Deontology is the idea that you have like these eternal set of rules, right? That there's this set of like true and false statements that exist outside of space and time. This is very obviously Platonism. Because like the very way these rules exist are functionally identical to how the forms exist in Plato's and like the Platonic worldview, right? And as a result, again, these are essentially just cosmic abstractions. Like these are just abstract ideas that exist outside of any individual mind, which is a contradiction in its own, right? Because abstractions can only exist in the mind; they can't exist outside the material reality. And let's be perfectly honest, these, like, under deontology, you must die for these abstract rules that cannot love you and cannot actually do anything for you, right? You must give yourself as a sacrifice or other people as a sacrifice. Like, if lying is deontologically wrong, right? Because lying is a transgression of the truth, then what do you do when the SS officers, like, come to your house and ask you, are there Jews hiding underneath your floorboards? Well, if there are, the deontologists would say you can't lie to them because lying is intrinsically evil. It's counter to the truth. So you have to give them up. And it's not like, again, it's not like these Platonic rules are going to reward you in any kind of way, right? They don't love you. They don't care about you. They merely demand that you serve them. Hold on. Captain Rudy says, in polytheism, they have one god for each thing. God of war, god of thunder, god of volcanism. Yeah, I mean, that's true. But, like, again, these gods are ghosts. Let's be perfectly honest. Like, Ares is not just, like... Ares is not a physical entity. He is a ghost, right? Zeus is a ghost. Poseidon is a ghost. Amaterasu is a ghost, right? Indra is a ghost. Like, all of them. And those are the two kinds of gods in polytheism and animism. They're the ghosts and then the abstraction. No, and we're just focusing on the abstractions right now. Let's say consequentialism, because you could do the same thing with deontology that I just did with deontology to consequentialism, right? So in consequentialism, you also have these false gods. You just call these false gods just happen to be consequence, right? Why? Because like the gods, they demand that you order your entire life, the entirety of your living style, to serve them, right? Now, granted, you're trying to bring about these circumstances, right? But there's nothing alien to the history of religion of the idea that, like, man ends up creating gods. This is a thing that does happen in some religions. And again, consequence doesn't give a damn about the content of your soul. It will absolutely demand you sacrifice your soul for its own vampiric ends, right? Like, that was kind of the point of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Le Guin, right? The entire point of there is, does this particular crime, right? Does this particular evil thing that we have to do, which nets us all a net positive, is it really worth it, right? And the answer that is given in the ones who walk away from Omelas is no, it's absolutely not. Those who walk away from Omelas are the ones, even though Omelas is a utopia, although a utopia built on the torture of a child, is the ones who walk away are the ones who are actually in the right. And you can see this, for example, in consequentialism too. In consequentialism, they try to avoid this by coming up with a rule consequentialism. The idea that, again, consequence is still the thing that decides the issue of right and wrong, but there are some things that are so intrinsically wrong that we have a rule against them even if the consequence is good, which is basically just importing a deontological principle into consequentialism, as if that doesn't show that consequentialism was flawed from the foundation, right? And again, like with deontology, well, how do you know which abstract rules to follow? Well, we judge those rules based on the consequences. So it's like, okay, so you're importing consequentialist reason to deontology, again, as if that doesn't show that you are completely, like, that you have an incomplete system that's not self-justifying. What's another good one? Like, the divine command theory has this exact problem as well, right? Because the divine command theory was not a Christian idea. The divine command theory was more or less like a voluntarist idea. It's more applicable to Islam than it is to anything like Christianity. Because the divine command theory basically says that God can decree whatever the hell he wants, and it is that way. That is exactly how it is. So it's like when Allah commands, for example, the rape of like infidel women, and the murder of the kafir and the torture of the kafir. Well, God can do that because when you take the Euthyphro dilemma, if you remember from like your philosophy class, if you ever took one, the question is, do the gods command the good because it is good, or do the gods command the good because it's good because they command it? Both of these are the wrong answer, right? Because if they command it because it is the good, then what good are the gods, right? You don't need the gods to be good. You can go past them. But if it's good because the gods command it, well, then the good is completely arbitrary. Right? Now, Christianity actually does have a way out of this dilemma, because they basically take a pseudo-Platonic worldview on this issue, where it's like God is himself being. He is himself existence. And goodness is ultimately, in order for it to make any sense, has to be rooted in that which is real, not that which is unreal, right? So God in his very character is not just the foundation of all physical reality, he is in his character the foundation of all Platonic reality as well. So God is the good himself. That's circumvents the entire issue. Captain Rudy says, if there are two wrong answers, then does that equal one right answer? Well, the point is, like, the dilemma is a false dilemma. It is a real dilemma for polytheism, because under polytheism, the gods are in conflict all the time, right? So then, like, again, even the question of, like, the gods decree it being good because the gods decree it doesn't really make sense, because it's like, okay, well, which god decrees it, right? Are we talking about Beelzebub, who is like you worship him by taking a shit on his on his idol, or are we talking about like Moloch, who we robe in coal and then put infants in the arm of when we light them on fire? Or are we talking about, for example, what's another good one? Huitzilopochtli? The one where it's like you feed him the most proficient of the game play the ball players, so that you can cut his beating heart out to feed to the sun. The gods are in constant conflict with each other in polytheism. This is not an issue that you have in like monotheism. And this is why monotheism can actually avoid the Euthyphro dilemma, but it doesn't always avoid the Euthyphro dilemma. Islam, for example, just like jumps headlong into the voluntarist, like, well, God is just a cosmic ubermensch, right? He decrees it, so it is. So it's a God, but in Islam, God can also lie. So there's a whole different can of worms there. But again, even under divine command theory, it's like the human being himself doesn't actually mean anything. For that exact reason, it's like, again, there's the divine command theory is basically situated under this idea that God is a cosmic ubermensch. It's the only two ethical theories that avoid this trap are virtue ethics and rational egoism. Maybe argumentation ethics. It depends on how you formulate it. Because these are the worldviews that actually say that man is a self-justifying existence, right? Man doesn't need recourse to any kind of external thing to justify the fact that he lives, right? And you can see this in like virtue ethics because, again, in like Christianity, because in virtue ethics, the question is, what does this action do to the content of my soul? Right? Captain Rudy says, okay. Captain Rudy says, yes, the answer is yes, right? Fair. But in virtue ethics, the real foundational issue is, what does this do? What does this action do to the content of my soul, right? Does it promote eudaimonia, goodness of spirit, or does it promote hamartia, right? Vice or, sin, I guess you could say. And this does make sense because, again, in a sense, in the Christian worldview, man is the imagio Dei, right? The image of God on earth, right? So in a sense, it actually would make sense that if God does exist, then virtue ethics would be the most logical extension of that because, again, God does not need to justify his own existence. That which he creates in his image does not need to justify their own existence, right? That which is made in the image of God is already self-justifying in its being, right? What does this have to do with Cake Week? Nothing. I just happen to like the subject matter, and I figured since it's the week I was born, I get to talk about whatever I want. It kind of just simple as that, right? Although, to be fair, on the Cake Week thing, I finally got the subscribe star, the Ko-Fi, and up, and I'm waiting on Patreon and YouTube to get back to me on monetization. Still not able to get monetized on Twitch yet because I need to get a average of four viewers per stream on 4 different streams, which I think I can hit pretty quickly. But yeah, so like that's virtue ethics though. It's like the issue of like, again, what the content of my soul is the primary concern in virtue ethics. Like, so there's a rational self-interest I have to take. I can't just sacrifice myself on the altar of some infinitely supreme good that is arbitrary in my brain. Thank you, thank you, Rudy. I appreciate it. But the other one is, like, again, rational egoism, because rational egoism says, like, again, it is, your rational self-interest is actually something you have to morally consider. And in fact, to not consider your own rational self-interest is itself an act of self-negation or self-abnegation and is intrinsically evil. I would agree with that, right? So I don't really have all that much respect for a lot of the classical theories of ethics outside of rational egoism, virtue ethics, and argumentation ethics, because I think a lot of this is just pagan. I think a lot of it is just pagan logic wrapped around in secular language, to be perfectly honest. So anyway, outside of my Andrew Lang style and like Eric Vogelin style rant, I guess we can get back to the video we're here for, right?
Altruism demands that you regard everybody as a value except yourself.
Yes, again, it demands self-abnegation.
And remember that this applies to every human being. Therefore, according to an altruist, no human being has any right to any value nor to any happiness of his own. He only has the right and duty to serve others.
And that is a intrinsically miserable way to live your life, right? It's like, oh yeah, my own happiness doesn't matter, but everyone else is also saying my own happiness doesn't matter. Right? So like the pursuit of your own happiness is actually evil under altruism, because again, you don't exist to pursue your own ends. You don't exist in an end as in yourself. Your ends don't actually matter. It is the ends of other people who also, by the way, their ends don't matter either. That matters. You can see how this sets up a fundamentally unstable contradiction.
Therefore, altruism does regard men as sacrificial animals, as object of sacrifice for others. That is not a theory of benevolence for men. There can be no benevolence for men unless one recognizes man's basic moral and political right to exist for his own sake, neither sacrificing himself to others nor others to himself, which is precisely what altruism denies.
This is the thing I think people also forget about, like the whole virtue of selfishness thing, right? Yes, it is an active rejection of the idea that you must sacrifice yourself for another, right? But it also requires the acceptance that no one else needs sacrifice themselves for you. Now, granted, there are times where it's like the sacrifice of the self is entirely rational, right? Like, to be perfectly honest, let's say you're a husband, right? And like your wife is like in a life or death situation. It is rational for you, considering that it may very well be worse for you in your value system and evaluation, right? To like experience the death of the mother of your children, right? Especially like, let's say your wife is pregnant, right? It may very well be objectively worse for you in your to experience the death of both your wife and your child, right? It makes sense to throw yourself into the line of fire. That's not really self-sacrifice, right? You are still pursuing your own good, your own like self-interest in putting yourself in harm's way to protect someone that you love in that way, right? So there is actually a real virtue in being selfish.
Miss Rand,
Because again, like,
why would anyone accept altruism under your definition?
Most people do not have a consistent moral theory to guide them.
that's true. And to be fair, it is kind of hard to, because the consistent moral theory that you would end up operating under will stem from what metaphysical substrate you end up working with, right? Like, if you're an atheist, the most reasonable ethical like system to use is rational egoism, right? But if you happen to be a Christian, the only ethical system that really actually works is virtue ethics, right? In fact, that was the Christian ethic across the entire Christian world, right up until the era of modernity, right? Argumentation ethics is another reasonable middle ground ethical framework that people can actually use. But anyway, Captain Rudy says, you can be selfish and still help others. They're not always mutually exclusive. I mean, yeah, because like sometimes it turns out helping others is your rational self-interest, right? Think about like just the way capitalism works, right? Like the employer and the employee benefit from each other being selfish, right? That's like the employee is not working for the goal of benefiting the employer per se, right? I mean, hopefully you're working for each other's interest because you're both mutually benefiting. But it's like, ultimately speaking, the employee is working for the employer for their own ends, right? And yet, because the employee is pursuing his own selfish interest, he ends up benefiting the employer. And because the employer is considering his own self-interest, he needs to consider the employee. So, like, again, selfishness requires cooperation a lot of the time.
A theory which they understand, accept, and fully practice. But the reasons why they accept altruism are many. Men realize, so long as they have to make choices, they need some kind of code of moral values to guide their choices and the sort of values and goals that they will pursue. Yet, they have not been offered any code of morality other than the altruistic one.
I mean, they kind of have, but I get what you're saying.
Most people are afraid to be left on their own in moral issues.
And the reason they're afraid to be left on their own in moral issues is because that puts all of the responsibility on the person actually who is alone on their moral issues, right? And what was it Plato said when he was asked? What was the thing Plato said when he was asked what would happen to a truly righteous man? And he said the people would impale him. Right? And I think one of the deuterocanonical texts also says the same thing. It's like, what would there was a parable of like the righteous man in one of the deuterocanonical texts, and the whole parable was involved the teachers conspiring to crucify the truly good man, right? This is the thing that pops up on occasion in the ethical literature.
They're more afraid of it than in any other issue. Men are not afraid to be scientists and to stand alone in the face of nature, but they are terrified in issues of values, in having to stand alone and define what objectively is right or wrong for men. That, I would say, is the most general reason why men accept altruism or at least pay lip service to it.
Yeah, I think we could all see that right now in some of the stuff, right? Especially with like some of the stuff people are allowing to pretend as if it has any kind of moral ground, right? Let's see, Crimson Rain 14. Shout out to the guy that didn't nuke USA over a computer error, right? Well, I mean, it's in his own rational self-interest to not die, right? And he might not die if he presses the button, but he will definitely die if he presses the button, right?
A common variant of altruism is the belief that you should give only to those who are less better off than yourself, those who are in need.
This is also a really, like, this is one of those things where this is emotionally manipulative language, right? Because when you think about the implication here, it becomes obvious where the diabolical substrate actually lies, right? Because there's a nested assumption here. Because again, it is an issue of obligation, not charity, right? The should is a duty, right? It is an ought that is nested in more comfortable language. So again, charity doesn't exist under this worldview because if it's an ought, then it's not unmerited. It's in fact an entitlement. Captain Rudy says, what's right and wrong isn't always black and white, especially if we're talking about legal versus moral issues. The correct answer isn't always the right answer. Well, I mean, law and morality are two different things. Like, law is an expression of the ethical framework of a people, but specifically the ethical framework of a people where it involves violence, right? Because the state is the monopoly on violence. So anytime it decrees law, it's an expression of the the area in legality regarding when violence is and is not acceptable, right? Which is not the entirety of ethics, right? the entirety of ethics is actually a lot more broad than that. But yes, you are right that it's not always black and white. And this is actually one of the insights Ayn Rand actually had a real important note on, which is especially when you're involving things like hypotheticals and like ethical questions. You have to, we don't live in the land of pure abstractions. And a lot of these ideas, like the trolley problem, is almost always a pure abstraction. Because you never ask the question, how the fuck did we even get in this situation to require this question to be asked in the first place, right? I mean, yeah, sure, they're useful to, like, learn some things about ethics, right? But we don't live in abstraction. We live in a concrete reality of causal chains, right? So the question of ethics often involves also a question of how the fuck did you even get there in the first place, right? That's not a morally like irrelevant question. How did I get here is entirely relevant to the question of morality, especially when evaluating a situation. Then you are right that it's not always clear, right? So, but the only way that you can really use that is if, again, you have a more realistic worldview about ethics, one that actually treats human beings as if they live in a concrete reality instead of an abstraction. And again, the only ones that really do this are virtue ethics, rational egoism, and argumentation ethics. Because even consequentialism pretends like it lives in the concrete, but it only really deals in abstractions, right? It deals in this abstract world where human beings can really know the outcome of an event before it actually happens, right? So like even consequentialism in like just is as abstract as deontology. It doesn't really touch the real world. So, but I would agree. Captain Rudy says, it's why the concept of morality police has always confused me. Well, I mean, yeah. I'm of the opinion that law should only deal with concretes, right? And in fact, it's one of the things I talked about in the Mizu video, where it's like, no matter how objectionable art can be, art is fundamentally a speech act, because art is the concretization of a set of chosen values, right? So it is literally a speech act, whether or not you like the content of the art or not. And ultimately speaking, I don't really think that people should be subject to violence because of an abstraction, right? There are no abstract persons. There are only concrete persons. There is no such thing as an abstract person. So in order for, I think, a law regarding that kind of thing to be reasonable, it needs to have a demonstrable victim in the concrete reality as opposed to some abstraction. But, yeah.
Is correct. That is what altruists hold, and the result of it is that it makes need, pain, failure, disaster the leading purpose and value in life. In other words, it amounts to the following situation, which you can see politically coming through today. If a man fails for any reason, his own fault or through accidents, gives him a mortgage on the lives, the earnings, the property, the services of those who have not failed. And therefore the result is a hierarchy of values of which the zero is the dominant standard.
So basically what she's saying is the idea that altruism, even in this narrow situation, creates a perverse incentive or a perverse situation where the producer does not actually deserve what he produces. It is actually the unproductive that deserve what is produced, right? Because those who have must give to those who have not. Right? And that, how else can you explain that situation, right? Those who have do not deserve what it is they have, so they must give it to those who have not. This also creates a logical contradiction, because now those who had not have, and they become the haves, which means that, again, they must give to those who have not. And it creates, again, this not at all stable situation, because, again, it's not about man as he lives in reality. Altruism is a world of abstractions as much as it is like deontology or consequentialism. Isn't that? Yes, that is actually, I made that comment earlier, Captain Rudy, actually, that altruism is the ideological root of the socialist worldview. Because this is where, if you take altruism seriously, where it necessarily leads. Again, the only way to avoid this is if you create some kind of internal contradiction to the underlying foundation of the worldview, right? Just like rule consequentialism, where it's like, oh yeah, we have to import a little bit of deontology in order to make consequentialism work. Or like, again, with consequentialism, where you judge them based on some deontological principle, therefore showing consequentialism doesn't really work either. This is the same thing that happens with altruism. In order to save altruism from devolving into socialism, you have to import some non-altruistic principles, which then undermine the very foundation of altruism in its first place. Cairo Chikage says circular logic. I mean, a lot of this is circular logic, but this is more of a law of non-contradiction thing. This is where it's like, in order for it to actually work, you have to include its own self-negation. Which basically means that, like, we've accomplished nothing in the conversation.
To the extent to which you lack any value at all, personal, spiritual, or material, you have a claim on your betters. To the extent to which a man has achieved values, he is the sacrificial animal for any zero holder. A man who is a full altruist would have to find a cannibal village and offer himself as a meal, because that would be the only way in which he could make a total sacrifice for the sake of others, deriving nothing in return. A total altruist is in a contradiction every time he eats, because that morsel of food may be needed by someone else. Because the altruists get out of it by saying that you should reserve for yourself only the minimum necessary.
Again, right there's that imported idea that cuts against the very moral foundation that we're talking about, right? This is exactly the same as rule consequentialism. This is exactly the same as, again, judging consequentialist ethics by some imported deontological logic. Again, give everything that you have to another, but keep only that which you need, right? I thought the entire point of altruism was the ego death, right? Anyway, Captain Rudy says, I heard a while back that someone came up with the idea of everyone works for free and the government gives them an allowance for them to be able to buy stuff they need. Yeah, well, that guy and a couple of his kids died from neglect, and yeah, he was very clearly a spoiled brat who spent literally thousands of dollars, if you convert the marks into current currency, right, on a tailor, just to spite his parents. Gotta hate Karl Marx, right? Gotta hate Karl Marx. Yeah.
In order to go on serving others. But that in itself is a contradiction. What is that minimum necessary? And the main issue is, why should the needs of others have primacy over your own? This question has never been answered by any philosopher of ethics. The sole base of altruism has always been mystical.
Now, when she says mystical here, she means in the sense of like confusion that actually comes off to the confused as if as enlightenment, right? So a mystical experience, whenever you hear an objectivist talk about like mysticism, what they mean is that someone is obfuscating the actual reality while at the same time making the person who is being misled feel as if they know more than they did beforehand. Sometimes, though, they actually know even less than when they entered the conversation, right? You see this all the time in like mystical circles, both on the left and on the right, because the right has their own little mystic, corners as well. But that's what they mean when they are talking about mystical here. Is like they're making someone feel as if they have a greater understanding while actually confusing the issue. Let's see. Captain Rudy says, I go by the philosophy of don't serve others with an empty cup. Yeah, that's actually a good principle.
The issue of self-sacrifice to others has to be taken on faith, because no rational justification for it has ever been offered, nor can it ever be offered.
Is it fair to say?
And I think that that's actually I think that's actually a good point to make. Nor can it ever be offered. I don't think I agree with her. I don't think that there is any way to. It's kind of like, I think this is one of those things where it's like trying to argue for irrationalism, right? So the rationalist believes that, again, the reason of human minds, right, is ultimately trustworthy. Even if flawed, it's ultimately trustworthy. And the irrationalist comes in and says, no, the reason of the minds of men is intrinsically unstable and cannot be trusted, right? To which all you have to do to shoot down that statement is point out, in order to make that proposition, you have to rely on the reliability of the reason which denies itself. So you have to infer that the statement is false in order to prove it true in the first place. So it's not a statement worth taking seriously, right? And I think the issue of, again, the self to be the abnegation of the self is exactly one of those things where it's like, in order to actually even make the claim, I think that you would have to inevitably contradict yourself in some way. So it's not a statement worth considering in the first place.
Say that an altruist would have to replace his own values by the values held by other people, and if this was followed generally, that there would be nobody able to hold the value of his own?
Yes, of course. Just as you must sacrifice your material possessions or your effort to others, you must also sacrifice your intellectual integrity. If you hold to your own ideas of what you believe is true, that is a selfish action. You must sacrifice your mind to what others believe or want to be true. Therefore, you must always agree with the majority in all issues, because it is selfish to hold out for no better ground than the conclusion of your own mind. That, of course, is the basic evil of altruism. It does demand the sacrifice of your mind.
I would agree. I would totally agree with everything she said in this, which is kind of the reason why I wanted to have this video. I think this is a great video. I think she is totally spot on in this particular conversation. And yeah, this is from the channel Liberty Pen. I don't know how many people here who are watching me have seen this channel. It's decent. It's popular. I mean, it's got 241,000 subscribers, right? So this one video alone has 152,120 views. So it's like not exactly it's not exactly doing poorly, but yeah, I like Liberty Pen. If you happen to like that particular thing, you're probably gonna like the rest of their content. Captain Rudy says some people are a walking contradiction, and that's what the alt-left and alt-right do. If you go against the grain, they crucify you. Yeah. I would largely agree. This is also the thing with like, yeah, we also have the issue of like purity spirals on both the left and the right, but we purity spiral for different reasons. Okay, what time is it? It is 22:54. Okay. So that will be the end of this stream. As far as the video goes, the video is going to end right now. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for giving me your time. I'll see y'all next time. I hope you enjoyed it. Y'all have a lovely day. Okay, so the recording is ended. Now I need to find someone to raid, right? I don't know if I can raid on Kick. I have 2 people on Kick, but I do know I can raid on YouTube. So, not YouTube, but on fucking Twitch. I don't know why YouTube was crashing out earlier, because it just would not function correctly. Let's see. Oh, excuse me. So let's go to Stream Manager. We shall go to Raid Channel. Let us see who we have on. I don't understand why following isn't just like the automatic default. Let's see. Is there anyone from the community that's on right now? Let's see. Ramen Doodles, Computhize, Simple Facts, Magic Angel, Frosted Fricks, Hina Bobina, Monikana, Tia Singer, Pia Ufo, Save Hin, Tobbs, Bula Rat, Corpse Channel, Sayeko. I haven't seen a single Skybro or like pod member or Red Veiler here. Holy crap. I guess everyone's off right now. Oh, Pippa. If I can't find anyone, I guess we're raiding Pippa. Right? Oh, Leaflet's on. Stellar Humanist Idol Clown. Oh my god. Fair enough. Yeah, it looks like almost no one is on. There's more people watching. Oh, wait, hold on. Is that correct? Okay, no, it's not. I'm being retarded. Let me check the Kick. See if there's anyone I can. I don't know how to do this thing on Kick. Let's stream. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's try Studio. Nope, that's not it. Well, fuck. I gotta figure out how to get the Kick thing to work the way I want it to. I have to figure that out at some point. Oh, that's a problem for later me, I take it, right? So I guess it's only gonna be, is Lifu on? No way, because I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to Lifu. What in the... Oh, okay. I was like, wait a minute, right? I was like, okay. You got me there. So, okay. I think we are going to raid... I'm going to try to see if I can first. Oh, sweet. It worked. Well, we're going to go to Phase Connect land, I guess, right? I don't really have the ability to, I don't know how to raid on Kick, so I guess that's going to be the end for the Kick stream. So, to everyone on Kick, thank you for stopping by. I will figure out how to do the raid on Kick soon. I just didn't get the time to do so today, so y'all have a lovely day. Okay. So that should be stopping the Kick, and let me see. Raid now. There we go. Peppa gonna rippa. Right, yep.
The uninitiated might make the uninitiated like him. Does this sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? That's the voice of Bomb Brood.